I still remember the exact smell of that cheap cologne my dad always wore. Too sharp, too strong, like he was trying to cover something up. Maybe he was. That day, it was all I could smell, even in a room filled with flowers and nervous teenagers. I was standing by the window in the school auditorium, staring out at the parking lot, tugging at the cuffs of a suit that didn't fit me quite right. The shoulders were too tight, and the sleeves barely brushed my wrists. It wasn't the tux we picked out last month. That one was midnight blue, custom-tailored, with my initials stitched into the inner lining. This one was thrift store brown, wrinkled, loose in all the wrong places. I could already hear the whispers behind me, people noticing. I swallowed hard and tried not to let it get to me. My name's Lucas. I'm 18. I just graduated high school 2 weeks ago, and this is the story of how my dad tried to ruin one of the biggest moments of my life, and how he underestimated the wrong person. I've always been the quiet one. The kid who kept his head down, got decent grades, never made a scene. But there's something about getting pushed too far, for too long, that changes you. I think it started long before graduation, but that day was the tipping point. That was the day my grandma saw everything for what it really was. And once she did, things would never be the same. My dad's name is Mark. He's complicated. Or at least that's what people say when they don't want to admit someone's just mean. He wasn't always like that, I think. When I was younger, he used to ruffle my hair and call me champ. He'd toss a baseball around with me on Saturdays and pretend to let me win at video games. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it was after my mom left. I was 9 when she packed her bags and walked out the door. She didn't even say goodbye to me. Just a quick hug, a kiss on the forehead, and then gone. I didn't know the full story back then, just pieces of conversations behind closed doors. Something about control and broken trust. I figured it out as I got older. After she left, my dad started drinking more. Not the staggering around type, but the quiet kind. The kind where you come home, and he's already 2 beers in, watching old war documentaries with the volume turned up way too loud. He stopped showing up to my school things, stopped asking about my day, and he started getting critical. Every little thing I did was wrong. My hair was too long. My clothes looked weird. My voice was too soft. "Man up, Lucas," he'd say, whenever I hesitated. "You're not a kid anymore." The only person who ever really had my back was my grandma, his mom. Her name's Elaine, and she's the kind of old woman who wears bold lipstick, swears by homegrown tomatoes, and doesn't take nonsense from anybody, not even her own son. She lived 2 hours away but called every weekend like clockwork. She'd drive up for my band concerts, even when no one else did. She remembered all my favorite foods, all my favorite books. When I told her I wanted to go to art school, she didn't even blink, just nodded and said, "Then we'll make it happen." It was Grandma who insisted on getting me the tux. She'd saved up for months, and I knew it wasn't easy for her. She was retired, living off a modest pension. But she said, "Every boy deserves to feel like James Bond on his big day." We went together to the boutique, just the 2 of us. I'd never had anything custom fitted before. I remember stepping out of the changing room and seeing her eyes light up. She clapped her hands and said, "That's my handsome boy." I almost cried, right there in the shop. A week before graduation, she called and said she'd be driving up the morning of the ceremony. I told her I'd be wearing the tux. She couldn't wait to see it. Except, I wasn't. The morning of graduation, I came downstairs to find the tux missing. The garment bag that had been hanging in the hallway closet, gone. I checked my room, checked the laundry room, checked the trunk of the car. Nothing. I asked my dad, casually at first, "Hey, have you seen my tux?" He didn't even look up from his phone, just muttered, "Probably left it somewhere." When I pressed, he shrugged and said, "Why do you need a tux anyway? It's just high school." I felt something twist in my chest. "Grandma bought that for me," I said. "She's driving all the way here to see me in it." That's when he looked up, smirked, and said, "It's just a suit, Lucas. Don't be so dramatic." I didn't understand. Not yet. I thought maybe he'd misplaced it. Maybe he'd taken it to get cleaned. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe he wouldn't do something so petty, so cruel. But then, just before we left for the school, I saw the receipt on the kitchen counter. It was folded, like maybe he meant to throw it away and forgot. I opened it up. $125. Men's formal wear consignment. Blue tux, lightly worn. I stared at that receipt for a long time. My stomach dropped. My ears rang. I didn't say anything. I just folded it back up, tucked it in my pocket, and walked to the car. He didn't say a word either. Just whistled along with the radio like it was any other day. By the time we got to the school, I felt like I was floating outside of myself. I posed for pictures with classmates who barely knew me, shook hands with teachers who'd probably forget my name by next week. And all the while, I kept tugging at the sleeves of that ugly brown suit, praying Grandma wouldn't notice. She arrived just before the ceremony started. I saw her coming across the lawn, holding her phone up to take pictures. She wore a blue floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat, the same one she wore to my 8th grade promotion. When she spotted me, she lit up. But then her face changed. She walked up, arms open, and hugged me tight. Then she pulled back, frowned a little, and touched my lapel. "Sweetheart, why are you wearing that old suit?" she asked gently. "Didn't we buy you a custom tux for graduation?" Before I could answer, my dad stepped in. He didn't miss a beat. "I sold it," he said, like he was commenting on the weather. Wouldn't have looked good on him anyway. I felt her body stiffen beside me. She looked at him, really looked at him, and I swear I saw something break in her eyes. She didn't speak. Not right away. Just stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Then, slowly, she turned back to me. Her expression softened again. She reached up and brushed a piece of lint off my shoulder. "Well," she said quietly, "that's all right, Lucas. You still look like a young man worth celebrating." But the tension in the air was like ice. The ceremony itself was a blur. I heard my name called, walked across the stage, shook the principal's hand. I didn't hear the cheers or see the flash of cameras. My mind was stuck on that moment. On her face. On his smug tone. On the tux that should have been mine. After the ceremony, we went back to the house for a small get-together. My dad invited a few of his friends, guys I barely knew, loud, and always joking about things I didn't find funny. Grandma came too, of course, bringing her famous lemon bars. She placed them carefully on the kitchen counter, then asked if she could talk to me outside for a minute. We sat on the back porch. The sun was starting to dip, casting everything in gold. She handed me a napkin-wrapped bar and watched me take a bite before she spoke. "Lucas," she said, slowly, "did he really sell it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She nodded, like she already knew. Like she just wanted to hear it from me. "I thought so," she said. Then she looked out across the yard, her fingers tightening around the edge of her purse. "There's a lot I've let slide with him over the years. Too much. But not this. Not when it comes to you." And that's when everything started to change. But I didn't know how far she'd go, or what she was about to set in motion. All I knew was that my dad had crossed a line, and Grandma Elaine? She wasn't the type to let it go. My grandma stayed behind after the graduation party while I started cleaning up plates and wrapping leftover sandwiches in foil. I could hear muffled voices from the living room, hers low and calm, his a little sharper, rising and falling like waves hitting rocks. I didn't catch all of it, but I caught enough. Words like disrespect, unacceptable, and not who I raised. Then his response, "Stay out of it, Mom. He's my kid." That hit me harder than I expected. My kid. Not Lucas. Not even your grandson. Just a possession. A thing. Something he could toss around like the tux he sold for pocket change. When she finally left, she gave me a hug that lasted just a second longer than usual and whispered, "I'll fix this. I promise." I wanted to believe her. But part of me was already shutting down, packing everything into a tight little box in my chest where I could pretend it didn't hurt. But that box didn't stay shut for long. The days after graduation should have been the kind of quiet, satisfying break every student dreams of. No more tests. No more morning alarms. Just late mornings, summer breezes, and college acceptance letters waiting to be opened. Instead, my dad started acting smug. Not in the usual way either. There was this new edge to him. Like he had won some sort of game, and I didn't know the rules. He kept making offhand remarks about kids these days and entitled brats whenever I passed by. He even joked with one of his friends on the phone, loudly enough for me to hear, that he was doing the boy a favor teaching him life doesn't hand you things on a silver platter. That would have been ironic if it weren't so twisted, because my dad had always had the silver platter. His mom, my grandma, was the one who bailed him out of debt when he maxed out credit cards in his 30s. She was the one who helped him buy the house after my mom left and took half the savings. She paid the down payment. She bought the furniture. She even loaned him money to fix his truck when he refused to get a second job. And still, he acted like he was the victim of the universe. like the world owed him something. Meanwhile, I was working part-time at a bookstore 3 blocks from our house, saving up for college supplies. I didn't have a car, so I biked there in the mornings, even when it rained. My grandma had offered to help with tuition, but I told her I'd try to earn what I could. I didn't want to be another Mark in her life, someone who took and took without thinking twice. Then came the mail. It was a thick envelope with the university seal, my dream art school upstate. I opened it alone, sitting on the back steps with the sun on my neck and my heart in my throat. Accepted. Full ride. Merit scholarship. Room and board included. I don't cry easily, but I came close. All I could think about was showing Grandma the letter, watching her eyes light up the same way they had in the tuck shop. I didn't show it to my dad right away. I knew what he'd say. Probably something about how art degrees were useless or how I was lucky they hadn't seen my face before deciding. But he found it the next morning. I came downstairs to find him sitting at the table with the letter unfolded in front of him, his coffee mug beside it, a strange look on his face. Not proud, not excited, almost offended. He looked up at me and said, "So this is what you've been hiding?" I blinked. Hiding? I just got it yesterday. He grunted and folded the paper neatly. Scholarship or not, don't think this means you're too good for real work. Drawing pretty pictures won't pay the bills. I didn't answer. There was no point. That box in my chest cracked a little more open. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Subtle at first. He started forgetting to leave dinner for me if I got home late from the bookstore. He accidentally moved my laundry to the floor to wash his own. My sketchbooks disappeared more than once, only to turn up in the garage with smudged pages or water damage. And through it all, he never mentioned the tux again. Never apologized. Never explained. It was like he thought if he ignored it long enough, I'd forget. But I didn't. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Saturday in early July. Hot, muggy, the kind of day where even the birds seemed tired. I was off work, so I decided to visit Grandma. I hadn't seen her since graduation, but we'd been texting. She said she had something to give me. A little surprise, she'd said. When I arrived, her little house smelled like cinnamon rolls and fresh-cut roses. She always made it smell like a bakery when I came over. She handed me a glass of lemonade and led me into the sunroom. Sitting on the coffee table was a box. I raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a suit. Not just a suit, the tux. My tux. Midnight blue, initials in the lining. Pristine. My jaw dropped. "But," I thought. She smiled, a little too tightly. That consignment shop had a good return policy. I had a hunch. Turns out, after the graduation party, she'd called every men's formal wear shop in the county until she found the one with a recent by matching the tux description and the name Mark Reynolds on the receipt. She drove there the next day, paid full price to buy it back, and never told him. "I wanted you to have it," she said simply. "He didn't get to decide you weren't worth it." I hugged her so tightly I thought I'd break her ribs. I didn't want to let go, but then she said something else. "I need to tell you something," she said, sitting down and folding her hands. "I've been thinking about what he said at the ceremony. About selling it. About how he treated you." I sat beside her, sensing the change in her tone. "I've tried for years to believe Mark would grow out of it. That he was just lost after your mother left. But Lucas, he's not lost. He's rotten. And I think it's time I stopped pretending otherwise." I waited. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a copy of her will. My name was on it. My dad's name wasn't. She had changed it. "Lucas, when I pass, everything goes to you. The house, the savings, the stocks. I've been planning to make the change for a while." Graduation sealed it. I couldn't speak. My hands shook. "I didn't want to tell you until you were older, but I don't trust him not to find out. If he does, I need you to know it wasn't an accident." It felt like the ground shifted under my feet. "I know you're strong," she said, placing a hand over mine. "But be careful. He won't take it well." She was right. I didn't tell him, of course. But Grandma was right. He did find out. 2 weeks later, I came home to find the front door wide open. I stepped inside slowly. Everything looked normal, but the energy was wrong. Quiet. Too quiet. Then I saw my backpack on the kitchen floor. Ripped open. My laptop missing. My sketchbooks tossed across the counter, some with pages torn. I turned the corner into the living room and stopped. There he was. My dad, holding the copy of the will. His hands shaking. His face unreadable. "You think you're smarter than me?" he said, voice low. "You and your grandmother. plotting behind my back. I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. She's leaving everything to you? You think you earned that? You think you deserve what I built? I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. You didn't build any of it, Dad. She bailed you out your whole life. His eyes went wild. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Then he threw the will into the fireplace and lit a match. I lunged for it, but the flames caught fast. Too fast. By the time I grabbed the poker, the edges were already curling black. I stood there, watching it burn, heart pounding, throat tight. And I realized something. This wasn't just about the suit. This was about control. About him knowing he couldn't bully Grandma anymore. Couldn't make me feel small. Couldn't erase me from the picture like he'd erased my mom from every photo in the house. He wanted to be the only name that mattered. And when he couldn't be, he decided to burn the whole thing down. But what he didn't know was that the copy he burned wasn't the only one. And what he really didn't know, Grandma had been planning something much, much bigger, and I was finally ready to stop playing nice. When the flames finally died out, all that remained were a few blackened corners of paper curled like dry leaves in the fireplace. My dad stood there, chest heaving, his expression flickering between triumph and uncertainty, like he wasn't sure if he'd just won or lost something important. I didn't move. I just stared at the ashes, at what was supposed to be my future, my protection, my proof. The room was heavy with silence. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You didn't win." His lip curled. "We'll see about that." Then he grabbed his keys and left. I stood there alone, the heat of the fire still radiating against my skin, but I wasn't warm. I felt cold, hollow, like everything I'd been holding on to, every plan, every sense of justice, every ounce of hope, had gone up in smoke with that will. That was the night I hit rock bottom. The worst part wasn't losing the paper. It wasn't even him finding out. It was knowing that a part of me still hoped, deep down, that my dad would change. That maybe, if I worked hard enough or made him proud enough, he'd wake up and see me. See the person I was trying so hard to be. But he didn't see me. He never had. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I barely slept. I went to work with bags under my eyes and a tight jaw. I stopped drawing for a while. Every time I picked up a pencil, my hands would shake. My sketchbooks stayed shut on my shelf like tombs. At home, things got worse. He started locking the fridge. Said I was eating too much and mooching off him. He cut off the internet. Claimed it was to save money, even though I knew he just didn't want me emailing Grandma or looking up lawyers. He even tried to convince my boss at the bookstore to cut my hours, told him I was distracted and needed discipline. Thankfully, my manager, Troy, saw right through him. He pulled me aside one day and said, "Whatever's going on at home, you've still got a job here." That meant more than he knew. I started spending more time at the store. Troy let me stay late to help organize shipments or restock shelves. I'd sit in the back room during breaks, just breathing, surrounded by the quiet hum of old pages and the comforting weight of stories that weren't mine. It became my refuge. One night, I was shelving graphic novels when Troy walked over and handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you," he said. I frowned. "Here." He nodded. "Dropped off by an older woman. Said not to open it until you're alone." I waited until I was back in the break room. Peeled the paper slowly. Inside was a thick folder. Legal documents. Property deeds. Financial records. And a letter. Lucas. I knew he might do something like this. That's why the version he burned wasn't the only one. The original is in my lawyer's office. Copies are with my accountant and safe in a fireproof box at my house. But I wanted you to have this too, not for proof, but for peace of mind. You are not alone. You are not powerless. And this is just the beginning. Love always. Grandma Elaine. I stared at the folder for a long time, then held the letter to my chest and let myself cry. Not out of fear, not even sadness, but relief. Someone still believed in me. The next morning, I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my tux, my sketchbooks, and the letter. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out the door while my dad was still asleep and biked to the nearest bus station. One transfer and 4 hours later, I was standing on Grandma's porch. She opened the door like she'd been waiting all night. Wrapped me in a hug that felt like home. "I was wondering how long it'd take you," she said softly. I stayed with her the rest of the summer. At first, I felt guilty, like I was imposing, but she brushed it off every time I brought it up. Your family, she'd say. And this is your home too. With her encouragement, I started drawing again. Slowly at first, doodles in the margins of napkins, sketches of her garden, portraits of her dog. She hung the first one I gave her on the fridge like it was a museum piece. I found myself getting up earlier, cooking breakfast, mowing the lawn, fixing things around the house. Not because she asked, but because I wanted to contribute. I wanted to deserve everything she was giving me. She noticed. You don't have to prove anything to me, Lucas, she said one afternoon, watching me scrub the porch steps. Just be who you are. Those words stuck with me. By August, I had a portfolio of new artwork. My confidence was growing. I spent my days working part-time at a small local print shop. Grandma knew the owner, and my evenings sketching, researching, and planning for college. We made a tradition of sitting on the back porch every Friday night with tea and talking about life. She told me stories about her childhood, about raising my dad, about the kind of man she hoped I'd become. Stronger than him, she said once. Kinder, wiser, but not harder. I asked her what she meant. She looked out at the garden and said, "Don't let what he did harden you. Let it teach you, but don't carry the bitterness." Easier said than done, especially when the phone call started. He called first in early September. I didn't answer. Then the text came. "You ungrateful brat. She's manipulating you. You think this changes anything? Then finally, you'll regret this." I didn't reply, but Grandma saw the messages. She shook her head and said, "He's losing his grip. That's why he's lashing out." I thought she meant emotionally. I didn't know she also meant literally. Because that fall, she made another change to the will. Not just leaving the house and savings to me. She put me in charge of the trust fund my grandfather had left behind. One I hadn't even known existed. "Your grandfather wanted this to help the next generation," she said. "Mark squandered it. But you'll make something of it." It wasn't a huge fortune, but it was enough to cover tuition, supplies, a used car. Enough to build something real. And I did. By October, I was taking online courses through the art school ahead of my official start in January. I bought a secondhand laptop, set up a workspace in the corner of Grandma's sunroom, and started freelancing. Logos, illustrations, even a few small commissions from comic book forums. My first $100 felt like gold. I didn't tell my dad any of this, but he found out. Because in November, just as the leaves were turning and Grandma was making her famous pumpkin pie, we got a knock at the door. It was him. I hadn't seen him in person since I left. He looked different. Thinner. More tired. Still tried to act like he was in control, though. "Mom," he said stiffly. "Lucas, can we talk?" She didn't invite him in. "I have nothing to say to you right now," she said calmly. He shifted his weight. "I made mistakes, all right? I was angry, but I'm still your son. Doesn't that mean anything?" "You're right," she said. "You are my son, and I will always love you. But love doesn't mean enabling." He turned to me. "Lucas, just talk to me, please." I didn't move. I didn't speak. And that silence? It said everything. He left without another word. That night, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd gained. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't given up. Because I'd climbed out of the ashes and started building something new. Something mine. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. But the part that changed everything, the twist he never saw coming, that was still waiting in the wings. Because Grandma wasn't finished either. And what she had planned next would finally turn the tables in a way no one, especially my dad, would ever forget. The air turned sharp in December, and with it, something shifted in the atmosphere between Grandma and me. Not just the comfortable warmth we'd built over the past few months, that stayed, but something new threaded beneath it. Purpose. Quiet, steady, and deliberate. Like we both knew something was coming, but neither of us was in a rush to say it out loud. Until one morning, over a pot of her peppermint tea, Grandma set her mug down and said, "Lucas, I want you to meet someone." I looked up from my sketch pad. "Who?" "My attorney," she said simply. "We're going to clean house." I blinked. "You already changed the will. You said everything was in the trust." She nodded. "That was for protection. But now, it's time for action." The words sat in the air like a lit match. She explained it all, calmly, like it was a checklist. The documents she'd kept locked away for years, financial records, property titles, even a paper trail that showed just how much she'd covered for my dad over the years. Debts paid, cars fixed, a business loan that never got repaid. All of it documented. All of it signed. Mark thinks he's entitled to everything I have, she said, her voice steady. But entitlement is different from legacy. And I'm going to make sure he learns that before I go. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt a flicker of guilt, not for her actions, but for being the reason behind them. The other part? It felt something deeper. Permission. We met with her lawyer, a man named Philip Withers, a sharp, well-dressed 60-something with silver glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. He didn't talk down to me. He treated me like I was in the room on purpose, not as some passive heir. This isn't about revenge, he said as we sat across from him in his office, the snow ticking softly against the windows. It's about setting boundaries. You're not cutting your father out. You're protecting yourself from the damage he's already done. Grandma handed him a flash drive. It's all there, she said. Every loan, every promise, every broken agreement. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. And the trust documents? She smiled faintly. Already updated. Lucas is the sole successor trustee. If anything happens to me, he controls the assets. He nodded approvingly. Smart. Then she turned to me. But we're not done. Over the next several weeks, the setup unfolded like a carefully orchestrated play. Grandma met with the bank. Closed joint accounts she'd once shared with my dad. Rerouted all automatic payments through a new trust-managed fund. She removed his name from the emergency contact forms at her doctor's. Changed the security codes on her home. She even sold the pickup truck she'd lent him years ago, the one still technically in her name. And she told him none of it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It was surgical. By Christmas, we were playing a very quiet, very personal game of chess, and my dad didn't even realize he was already in check. But the real turning point came on New Year's Eve. We were setting up in the living room for our usual tradition, popcorn, old movies, thick socks and blankets, when Grandma handed me a thin manila envelope. What's this? Open it, she said, eyes twinkling. Inside was a formal invitation. Glossy cardstock. Elegant calligraphy. Elaine Reynolds. Cordially invites you to the Legacy Celebration, honoring Lucas Reynolds, scholarship recipient, artist, and successor trustee. Saturday, January 14th, 6 p.m., Windsor Country Club. I read it twice before looking up. A party. A fundraiser, she corrected. But yes, also a celebration. You've earned it. I was stunned. Why? She laughed softly. Because we're going public. I blinked. Public? She nodded, folding her hands. Mark has always controlled the narrative. To his friends, to family, to the community. Always playing the victim. Telling everyone your mother ruined him. That you're ungrateful. That I coddled you. But the truth matters, Lucas. And this night? It's not just a party. It's a reset. I swallowed. Is he invited? Oh yes, she said. In fact, he's one of the guests of honor. I almost choked. Are you serious? I am, she said, her tone serene. He won't be able to resist showing up. He'll think it's about him. That I'm softening. And that's exactly what we want. She had a point. My dad's ego was too big to turn down a stage, especially if he thought he'd be praised on it. But what he didn't know was that the stage would already be set, and the spotlight wouldn't be on him. The next 2 weeks were a blur of planning. Grandma made calls. The event coordinator, a woman named Teresa with a no-nonsense voice and the organization skills of a military general, came by twice to walk us through catering, seating, lighting, and logistics. We booked a string quartet, sent formal RSVPs, reserved the largest ballroom in the Windsor Country Club, a venue my dad had once tried and failed to rent for a failed business seminar. I remembered how bitter he'd been back then, ranting about elitist gatekeepers. It was poetic. I spent hours designing the event program myself, using my artwork, incorporating subtle symbols in the borders, even embedding a hand-drawn dedication to Grandma on the back cover. I printed them in the shop after hours, carefully trimming each one by hand. It felt like building something sacred. Meanwhile, Grandma gave me full access to the guest list. That's when I had an idea. Not revenge, not exactly. More like vindication. I reached out to people who mattered. Old family friends, teachers, my band director from high school, my mom's college roommate, who had always kept in touch with Grandma and had once told me she believed my mom left not because she stopped loving me, but because she was afraid of him. They all RSVP'd yes. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mom. Her voice on the other end was hesitant. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. But the moment I told her what the event was about and who it was really for, she said just 5 words. Tell me where to be. Grandma didn't even blink when I told her. She deserves to see the boy you've become, she said. And so do you. We didn't tell anyone she was coming, especially not my dad. The week of the event, things started to stir. My dad called Grandma 4 times in 3 days. Each voicemail was a little different. The first was casual curiosity. Hey, got the invite, sounds fun. The second, more pointed, didn't realize Lucas was doing so well. The third, laced with suspicion, you're not trying to embarrass me, are you? The last one, blunt, if this is some kind of stunt, don't expect me to play along. She didn't return any of them. Let him squirm. Let him wonder. The day of the event, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the very same midnight blue tux that had once gone missing. Grandma had pressed it herself, polished the shoes, even helped with my tie. You clean up nice, she said, stepping back with a proud smile. I turned, the weight of everything behind us, and everything ahead, settling on my shoulders like the finest armor. You ready? I asked. She met my gaze in the mirror. More than ever. We drove together, arriving early, before the first guests trickled in. The ballroom glowed with soft gold light, the tables dressed in white linens and garnet napkins. A slideshow played on loop behind the stage. Images from my childhood, photos of my art, candid shots of me and Grandma in her garden. People began to arrive. First in pairs, then small groups. Old neighbors, local business owners, teachers, family friends, my old history teacher, my art mentor. Even Troy, my boss from the bookstore, walked in with his wife and gave me a nod that made my throat tighten. And then he arrived. My dad, Mark Reynolds. Tall, confident, wearing a suit that was a size too small and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He walked in like he owned the place, scanning the room for familiar faces. He spotted me near the stage. His smile widened, performative and practiced. Lucas, he said loudly, crossing the room. You didn't tell me you were the star of the show. He hugged me without asking. His cologne hit like a punch. I stepped back. It's Grandma's event, I said evenly. I'm just along for the ride. Oh, come on, he said, gesturing to the banner behind the podium. Your name's all over this thing. Must be nice, huh? Before I could answer, Grandma approached. Mark, she said smoothly. Glad you could make it. He leaned in for a kiss on her cheek. She gave him a polite nod and stepped aside. That's when he noticed the seating chart. His name wasn't next to mine. It wasn't even at our table. It was tucked in the far corner, next to a retired couple who barely knew us. His brow furrowed. What's this about? He asked. Grandma didn't flinch. You'll see. And he would. Because what was about to happen, what we'd spent months preparing, wasn't just a speech or a slideshow or a ceremony. It was a reckoning. And the moment his past walked through that door, wearing a pale blue dress and a calm expression, he finally realized the spotlight was no longer his. The moment my mom walked through the ballroom doors, the air changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No screeching halt to the music. No dropped glasses or gasps. Just a ripple, subtle but unmistakable, like someone had cracked open a window in a room that had been suffocating for years. She walked in slowly, head high, wearing that soft blue dress I remembered from my childhood. Her hair had streaks of silver now, and she looked older, but stronger too, like someone who had fought hard battles and survived all of them. My dad's eyes locked on her immediately. At first, he didn't move. Then his mouth twitched, barely masking the panic that flickered behind his eyes. He stood there frozen, and I could see his hands curl into fists before he shoved them in his pockets. My mom didn't flinch. She crossed the room with grace, stopping only once, to nod at Grandma, before coming to stand beside me. She gently touched my arm and gave me a small, proud smile. It wasn't much, but after 6 years of silence, it was everything. Hey, Lucas, she said, voice soft. I didn't respond with words. I just nodded and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. Mark started walking toward us, slow, like he wasn't sure whether to charge or retreat. I could tell he hadn't expected this. He never thought she'd show her face again, not after the way he told everyone she'd abandoned us, that she was unstable, that she didn't care about me. He'd crafted that lie so carefully, built his whole reputation around it. And now she was here, alive, steady, smiling. He stopped a few feet from us. "What is this?" he muttered. "Why is she here?" Grandma stepped in before I could respond. "Because she has every right to be." His eyes narrowed. "You invited her?" "I did," Grandma said calmly. "And Lucas did too." He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I met his gaze and held it. Then he chuckled, bitter and shaky. "This is what this night is about, huh? A little stunt? A family ambush?" "No," I said, stepping forward. "This night is about the truth, and everyone here deserves to hear it." He scoffed. "What truth? That your grandmother's brainwashed you? That your mother ran off and now wants a redemption arc? That you, Mark?" Grandma's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He froze. "You've spent years painting yourself as a victim," she said. "To friends, to family, to this community. And while you did that, Lucas was quietly surviving your bitterness, your manipulation, your control. Don't," he warned. But she didn't stop. She turned toward the growing crowd, her voice rising just enough to be heard. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Some of you have known our family for decades. Some of you watched Lucas grow up. Many of you have heard versions of our story, stories told by Mark Reynolds. Tonight, I'd like to share the version that matters." Mark's face reddened. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said, stepping forward beside her. "This is overdue." I pulled a remote from my pocket and clicked it. The slideshow behind us changed. Gone were the childhood pictures. Now came receipts, loan agreements, screenshots of texts, financial statements, dated emails. A carefully ordered slideshow documenting 15 years of Grandma's silent support and my dad's silent sabotage. The guests watched in stunned silence. I spoke next, calmly, clearly. "I wore a thrift store suit to my graduation because my dad sold the custom tux my grandmother bought for me. I didn't find out until the morning of the ceremony. He never apologized. Just said it wouldn't have looked good on me anyway." I paused. "Let that sit." "He also burned the first copy of Grandma's will in our fireplace because he couldn't stand the idea that he wouldn't control everything she built." People started murmuring. A few turned to look at him. He shrank back, face twisted in disbelief. "You think this is revenge?" he snapped. "You're just a kid playing lawyer. None of this will hold up." "It already has," said a new voice. Philip Withers, Grandma's lawyer, stood near the front table. He held up a leather-bound folder. "All documentation has been notarized. Multiple witnesses. Assets are already transferred to the trust. Mark Reynolds holds no financial or legal claim to Elaine Reynolds' estate." Mark's mouth opened and closed, like he couldn't breathe. Someone clapped. Then another. And then the whole room was applauding. Not for me. Not for revenge. But for the end of a lie. And the start of something honest. Later that night, after most of the guests had left and the string quartet had packed up their instruments, Mark confronted us again in the parking lot. His voice was low and furious. "You think this is over? You think humiliating me fixes anything?" "No," I said, stepping between him and my mom. "This isn't about fixing you. This is about finally protecting us." He sneered. "You'll come crawling back one day. You'll need me." "I needed a father for 18 years, I said quietly. "You weren't there." He stared at me for a long time, then got into his car and drove off without another word. We haven't seen him since. The weeks after the event were quiet, peaceful, like the house could finally exhale. I started my first semester at the art school in January. Grandma helped me move into student housing with a care package full of snacks and handwritten notes tucked between my sketchbooks. My mom and I started talking more. Slowly, carefully. I wasn't ready to forgive everything. Not yet. But I was ready to try. And so was she. One night, a few weeks into the semester, she called me out of the blue. "I was proud of you," she said. That night. For standing up to him. For telling the truth. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Thanks." And that was enough. As for Grandma, she's still gardening. Still making tea. Still telling me I need to wear socks indoors or I'll catch cold in the bones. She's not just my guardian anymore. She's my anchor. My mentor. My hero. And now, thanks to her, thanks to all of it, I finally know who I am. Not a victim, not a shadow, but a name worth carrying forward. Lucas Reynolds. Artist. Student. Grandson. Survivor. And the man who broke the cycle.